And as some comrades say, it's lit, right? Lit. The revolution is lit.
We are a nation of people that's been dispersed against our will. We must be organized. There are material objectives that we have as a people.
We can't settle!
We demand reparations. We are one people. We are one Africa. We are Africans. We were Africans when we got on the ship. We are Africans when we got off the ship.
Black power matters.
We have to recognize that America is a settler colony. The police are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. All over the world, you see people rising up. The people must have power. Because we are Africans. Our power to the people. Black power to the African community. They thought they had destroyed the movement, but we are here to tell them that black is back. Black is back. Capitalism must be destroyed. Colonialism must be destroyed. The people must have power.
Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Tommy Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is highly important, and we encourage you right now to invite your friends and family to it. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela continues a study of the book Reparations Now, the abbreviated report from the International Tribunal on Reparations for Black People in the U.S. He begins on page 41 with the section titled People's Advocate Omali Yeshitela, Indictment of U.S. Imperialism. For the first hour, Chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we'll open it up for you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Comrade Director Akile, for that introduction. I want to welcome all of you to this discussion on today. I'm especially happy to be able to talk to members of the party and the Uhuru movement right now, and to Africans and our friends at large throughout the world. This is a very exciting and important period of history that we are experiencing, and all of us should really recognize that this is our time, that so many of us who are alive and who sometimes think about how it would have been or could have been, and wish we might have been there in the 1960s with the high tide of revolutionary struggle that most of us use as reference points to understand how powerful our movement has been. Well, we in the African People's Socialist Party have said all along that the Black Revolution of the 60s was a dress rehearsal, that this is the time right now. And history has imposed upon us this great responsibility to free ourselves, to free the world from this blood-sucking social system that came into existence as a part of the process of stealing life and resources from Africa and African people globally. Is it a horrendous social system that is centered in Europe initially, in terms of how it got its start as colonial slavery, and it's that system that has continued to infect the rest of the world. And even as some forces are trying to free themselves from this parasitic social system or from the effects of this parasitic social system, they inadvertently, many of them carry the virus with them to the various locations of the world by maintaining the system itself. So in a different face, as they like to talk about this colonial virus now, having other variations, mutating, etc. That's what we see often, where people have assumed that the end of our oppression because of a particular manifestation in a particular location have found that we still are oppressed, because even as we kill this symptom of it, we didn't kill the system itself. And now we are engaged in an incredibly powerful moment in history where the system has obviously is afflicted with a severe crisis. And our responsibility as revolutionaries is not to find ourselves trying to support one component of the system versus another component of the system, not to be so afraid of our own responsibility. And that's what we're talking about, the responsibility to be free, the responsibility to lead, the responsibility to destroy the capacity of our oppressors to govern, to rule us, and to become a self-governing people who are responsible for our own future. So that's part of what this discussion is about. That's part of all the work we're doing. I'm happy to say that I stepped out of right before coming to this discussion. I stepped out of one of the Black Power summits that the African People's Socialist Party had established around the world. We've done one in the Caribbean summit. We've done summits in the southern parts of the United States, southern region, and the Midwestern and the Western region, northern region of the United States. And we have done one for Europe. Africans in Europe have pulled together this Black Power summit. And just a moment ago, the one that conducted for Africa has concluded. And these are not just summits, events that's been happening in different places. These are summits that have specific kinds of responsibility. Number one, these are summits that connect Africa in a different way all around the world, gives Africa a single voice, a single philosophical perspective that's being spread everywhere, gives us an organizational presence, an organized organizational presence. So Africa can fight for itself from various locations in the world. That's what's happening. That's what happened. And then on yesterday, the African People's Socialist Party also was manifesting a magnificent reparations legacy project, where we had white people, Europeans, colonizers who've deserted the colonizer and joined into the struggle for Black power. And this was an incredible event with Europeans, North Americans, the colonizers who from different places throughout the United States. So it's a powerful project that we're involved in. At the very same time, we see this system severely stricken, and that's most obvious with the United States and what we see happening in the United States, the political crisis that's responding to the inability of a social system to easily feast off the resources of the peoples of the world, not only Africa and African people, but throughout the Middle East and other places, which of course takes resources away, but it also takes prestige. This whole white identity has come as a consequence and relies on this ability to step on peoples around the world. The identity, the value of whiteness has come as a consequence of devaluing life for everybody else. And so to the extent that people have taken back the resources, fighting in Afghanistan, fighting in Venezuela, fighting throughout the Middle East and inside the communities of the United States and other places like that. To the extent that happens, it not only takes resources away, but it takes an identity away from white people who are all powerful, who are all right, who are all beautiful, who are all these other things. So this is a profound crisis that's being experienced that we saw demonstrated by a group of white people who attacked the capital of the United States government, which is headquarters, even if shakily so, of the whole imperialist system. These are people who attacked the capital looking to try to get their whiteness, to make America be white again, and which means make America be this dominating white power colonial entity that controls the world. And we are part of the struggle that's deepening this crisis for them. Our objective, of course, is to simply win our freedom. So I'm going to talk a little bit about from this Reparations Now book. It's an important book. And I want to say again that this is an abbreviated book. We expected within a couple of months at most to have printed most of the testimony that came from the tribunal. We were not able to do that. This tribunal happened in 1982. This is the moment in history that's projected the reparations movement into the world. This was a part of the determination by the African People's Socialist Party that we will make reparations a household word. It's not just going to be something that Congressperson this will take before, or Judge this will have a hearing. This is going to take the power of the people. That's what we said all along, that we had to make this reparation question, put it in the possession of masses of African people as a part of the weapon to do what? To win the liberation of African people. And this that we're talking about, this tribunal, happened inside the United States, but it was a part of the struggle for African revolution. Now, we are supposed to begin here on page 41, and I just want to say a couple of things about that. Because we're going to do something a little different than what was anticipated. The reason for that is that I want to start next Sunday with the study that comes from the political report to the upcoming plenary, the second plenary of our 7th Congress, which will begin in February 6th, I think it is. And I want to start, and there's not going to be enough time in that plenary to read the political report as is scheduled right now. So I want to start reading the political report, and all the party members and Uhuru members should be aware of this. I want to start reading that this next Sunday, so that by the time we get to the plenary, the objective is to have begun and be well enough into the political report that it can be completed during the plenary process itself, and basic resolutions and other kind of discussions can revolve around that. So I have to be rapid now in terms of how we deal with the study on today. I want to say that this study is important. This Reparations Now is important, so important that we intend, Comrade Director Akile has already announced that sometime within the next few months to actually do the entire, most of the testimony from the tribunal. We're gonna publish much more than what we have here. So it's going to be a larger book so that you can have access to the testimony of the various people who participated in this process. And so I just want to say that. And then I'm going to read a little now. And you'll have to forgive me because I am going to try to be expeditious. This is 41. This is the indictment of U.S. imperialism that we're talking about. It begins, sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world. And we are talking about a tribunal, a world tribunal on reparations for African people. And for us in the African People's Socialist Party, as I said, reparations is a function of the revolution. We are not in a struggle to try to get well-fed slaves so that, okay, you got reparations, you're still living under colonial domination, you know, hooray for you, a gilded cage, as they might say. So for us, the reparations issue, reparation is a function of the revolution, is a part of the process to take back our freedom, to take back our Africa, to unite African people around the world so we can be in possession of our own resources, our own dignity as people. And part of what this is about too is to engage in a process of creating diplomatic encirclement of the United States. This is 1982 when we've done this. And so the idea is that the United States at this time runs around the world, as we know, overthrowing governments and crushing peoples and then killing Africans and indigenous people in this country, including the Mexicans and people who are referred to as Indians and things like that. That happens normally, that all the time inside the United States. So what we want to do is make this movement and create a diplomatic encirclement of the United States to make it more difficult, to make it impossible for the United States to walk the planet without having to answer to the peoples of the world for the crimes, for the offenses that it's making against the peoples of the world. This is something that we believe contributes to the capacity, the ability of the African revolution to express itself, to do what's necessary to win our freedom and to have allies among the peoples of the world who understand the nature of this system based on how it is attacking African people. This is our call for African people, not just to be sympathetic to the plight of Black people in the United States, but to unite with us in the struggle to overthrow this foreign and alien power that we call colonialism that dominates every aspect of the life of African people. That's what we were doing then. That's what we do now. And so I just want to go ahead and begin. And we use international law here, not because some belief in international law as such. It's a political tool. It's a political weapon. And the international law is what informs the bourgeoisie has been able to hide behind this law. It will enslave you, and then it will make slavery legal. Then it will say anybody who's trying to escape from slavery has broken the law, and then we tell them the truth because slavery is legal. And so what has been happening over a period of time, the U.S. and all the imperialist powers have to disguise their real intentions, even in the form of their law. They even have to hide it from the colonizer. The colonizer himself has to hide what his objectives are. He can't say, I've created a world that little white babies will live at the expense of Black babies and brown babies and yellow babies and other people around the world. They say that there's some noble experiment in the human society that's here to save the heathens for themselves, to bring civilization and things like that. And then they will create laws that designed to maintain our slavery, but in the name of helping us or helping world peace or something to this effect. And that's what laws have done. Laws are nothing simply except the opinions of the ruling class. And so now we say we would intervene in international law. It looks a different way depending on the power of the people at any given moment that pushes the imperialists to a place where they have to, at least in the form of their law and institutions, at least pretend some deference to the rights of the people. And that's how we see law and saw it then. And so we will make use of it to deepen the contradictions, expose the contradictions of the system itself. But the system is rotten through and through, and every aspect of the system is rotten. There's nothing good that comes from it. Whether it calls itself Kamala, whether it calls itself Donald, it doesn't matter. It's the same system that is affecting us. And if you got that system, you got that problem. And if you want to get rid of the problem, then you have to get rid of the system. And so anyway, we're going to go back to page 41. On page 41, this is the opening indictment of U.S. imperialism. And this is from the People's Advocate, Omali Yeshitela. this was my presentation. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, today we are charged with the most serious responsibility of bringing charges against the United States government for crimes it has committed against the oppressed African people in the United States. In the name of the oppressed and domestically colonized African population in the United States, this World Tribunal on Reparations for Black people in the United States charges the United States government with crimes against our people, which constitute a violation of international law, such law being defined for the purpose of this World Tribunal. And then we express in the world international law that we're using for this tribunal that speaks specifically to the oppression of African people inside the United States. This is what we've asked this body of international judges and observers to have a viewpoint on and to make a ruling on in terms of U.S. culpability, U.S. responsibility, the criminality of the United States government in its treatment of African people. That's what this is doing. And that's who I'm speaking now to this court, and I'm speaking to the peoples of the world to observe this and saying that we're using international law and say, when we talk about the international law for the purpose of the tribunal, number one, we're talking about general international law. And then there's a definition in this book, and you should look at it in terms of what general international law is, because it does cover, from our perspective, what this tribunal is doing. We said number two, the laws the tribunal will be governed by would be the Charter of the United Nations. And this is important too, because as you know, the imperialist powers gave themselves cover in the creation of the United Nations for the crimes they intended to commit through the United Nations against the peoples of the world while maintaining unity among themselves. And so they gave their actions cover in really nice words about peace and friendly relations, etc. So they put down this charter. This is what we stand for. So we say we're using this too as a part of the law that will inform this court that we are involved in. And three, we used the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. This is a part of the law. This is the United Nations Convention. And I just want to say a couple of things about that quickly. And says that the present convention, in the present convention, talking about this genocidal law convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And then it says that these are the acts which will be punishable under this convention. A, genocide. B, conspiracy to commit genocide. C, direct and public incitement to commit genocide. D, attempt to commit genocide. E, complicity in genocide. So this is a law, the international law. This is the convention about the United Nations. If you heard everything that happens to African people in the United States in this convention. And so this is what we're raising up to the consciousness of African people, and also making the world have to recognize that this is what's happening. Of course, the Convention on Genocide was not created for African people. It was, although it was done by the United Nations, this was work that was done by a Polish Jew, I think his name was. And it was done to describe what had happened to Europeans in Europe, Jewish people, done to white people by white people, but it was not intended for us. In fact, Lipsky, the guy who wrote the law, actually in different times had to say that it didn't have anything to do with us. And he had to do that because he had to let the imperialist powers know that you don't have to worry about yourself being brought before some kind of international court because of genocide, what you do to Africans, what you do to indigenous people, what you're doing in Vietnam, et cetera, stuff. It's not about you. And it's about us. It's about Jews. That's how it was characterized. But it's white people who were from Europe who had been victims of what Europe had done to them. We say that International Bill of Human Rights was something that we were using for the law for this tribunal. And so based on that and other aspects of international law, we did the tribunal. And the United States was found guilty of a number of violating international law that we found in those treaties and conventions that I just read. And then after that, we went through a process and there are various judges and jurors, and they spoke to it. You will be able to find that in this, you should have this again now, you should have the testimony from Reparations Now that was in this abbreviated section before you. So a judgment was made. And after that, I did a summation to the World Tribunal. Then I'm gonna quickly, if I can, share that with you because I think it's important. Because it says who we are as a party, comrades and brothers, and a movement. And it says something about the work that we have been doing and continuing to do up to now, that we did not discover the question of colonialism. You'll see that it's referenced all throughout this document in 1982. We did not just discover the question of reparations. This is what the whole tribunal was based on, and the intent to make reparations a household word, to make it something that the overall movement would be involved in, and we succeeded. Yes, we succeeded. And I'm going to give you just now the summation. I'm going to be as quickly as I can because I would like to be able to make the summation and then give you an opportunity to intervene in this discussion as well. And so here is the summation after the tribunal, after that is ending the tribunal. Sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, we've heard the testimony of some of the finest representatives of our people. We've heard testimony which confirms like nothing else other than our very existence confirms greatness. The greatness of this people who brought civilization to this earth. And who? It is very clear how the responsibility to bring civilization back to the face of this earth. That is the objective responsibility independent of the will of those in this room. We've heard testimony and there has been introduced documentation that shows that it is the oppression of African people here and throughout the world, which is the very foundation, the cornerstone of the existence of this terrible world economic system that causes destruction throughout this earth. Such being the case, it is very clear that if you remove the cornerstone, buildings will come tumbling down. This is in no way an attempt to refute the struggles of the various peoples around the world and the need to be in solidarity with them. It's just like any structure and building. If you want to take it down, there are several routes you can, there are several routes. You can take it down brick by brick, or you can target the cornerstone and snatch it out, and the entire building comes down. African people, the oppression of African people, the continuing oppression of African people, which every reactionary oppressive force on the face of the earth is in unity to maintain. African people, our oppression, which has never ended, which has been continuous and which has occurred on various fronts at the same time, represents the cornerstone. And at the same time, the weakest link in this imperialist country, this imperialist world. Therefore, the judgment which comes from a tribunal such as this is very, very important. Someone may think that to be able to make such a statement as this statement, to be able to make a statement as those statements made by these jurors represent partiality or biasness. Such a person thinking such a thing would be absolutely correct. But to say it represents biasness is not to say that it represents injustice or injustice. It is recognized that all institutions are given birth by the societies from which they are developing. If you live in a situation in any country, whether there is a court there, a police force, an army, a bank, or what have you that exists in that situation, you will have the nature of the society that it comes from. If you live in a country or world that is built on slavery, barbarity, thievery, genocide, the institutions of that society in any place of the world will be there for the purpose of sustaining the enslavement and the genocide. There is the bourgeois court in this society. There is the court of the slave master of the ruling class. There have been continuous attempts to prove objectivity when they take us there before lynching us legally. If they don't lynch us on the streets, like so many people testified about in the last 2 days. But what they do when they talk about objectivity is attempt to obscure the nature of the institutions themselves and the fact that these institutions cannot but be about maintaining that which gave it birth, that which enriches it, and that which keeps the powerful powerful and the powerless powerless. For today, in the last 2 days, we have set about creating another institution. And this institution at this juncture in history does not have a permanent place to rest except in us. And this institution is a world tribunal which brought the United States government for the first time in its history to trial for the crimes it has committed against Black people in this country. And this tribunal is a biased tribunal. It is a tribunal that moves on the assumption that Black people must be free and that anything that stands in the way of that liberation must be removed. We are biased. This World Tribunal stands in opposition to virtually every court that exists in this country. They are opposing and contending forces. This World Tribunal stands in opposition to the United States Supreme Court. They are opposing and contending forces. One represents the powerful and oppressive, one represents the oppressed and those who are determined to be free. It is a biased tribunal. It does not attempt to represent the interests of those who are oppressors. It does not pretend to represent the interests of those who are oppressors. There is no such objectivity on the face of the earth. Some pretend that there is such objectivity. We do not pretend. And if only for that reason, with all of its biasness, this court is a much more a just court than those courts which exist in this country. I must say that one very important difference we are confronted with here is that we must not take the holding of state power lightly. It is the possession of state power by our oppressors that makes them able to carry out their oppressive will. When we talk about state power, we talk about control of the courts, the police, the army, the navy. We are talking about an apparatus that has the ability to coerce, to force people to do what they want done. We must not take lightly the notion of state power. We don't have state power at this time, but we have the capacity for revolutionary people's power. And the question that is before us today, the question that is more important or that will give significance to anything that any witness stated here, more significance than any solidarity shown and not shown by those who did not have the courage to come and act as judges. The most significant thing that's going to give meaning to any of this, to the risk of life and liberty of those international jurors who sit here, because they face tyrants where they come from, tyrants who are upheld by this government. The thing that will give it meaning is what we do upon leaving this building. If this court and its verdict is going to be recognized as having meaning in the world, it will be because of those of us who are in here today. Take it out in the world, understanding its meaning and understanding its legality and forcing everybody else to recognize that legality. Let me tell you something. We started off this tribunal giving a history of the solidarity that African people have given to every revolutionary force in this world. We started off building for this tribunal with promises of solidarity from virtually every revolutionary force in this world. Look at what is here with us in terms of the judges and the world observers. They know the power of U.S. imperialism. We must teach them the power of international solidarity. We shall teach them the power of international solidarity by the forcefulness of the focus that our revolutionary movement in this country finally has. Reparations is a demand whose time has come. Therefore, we can sum it up very easily for anybody, whatever nationality, anybody who presupposes that they are friends of Black people in this country. Do you support the judgment which came from the World Tribunal on reparations for Black people? 1. And what is your position on the demand by 40 million African people in the U.S. for reparations now? The thing that gives meaning to everything that has happened in this room for the last 2 days is our willingness and our capacity to make everybody have an answer to that question, everybody. I can't talk about the importance of this too much for too long. Our international allies have accepted the definitions of the white ruling class of the world who we are, and our significance. I'm sorry, let me say this. Our international allies have accepted the definitions of the white ruling class of the world for who we are and our significance all over the world. I'm telling you what I know. I can tell you revolutionary countries where I've visited. I've watched Tarzan on television. So now we tell the world, our allies, objectively speaking, our objective allies. Some people are our allies objectively and are just too dumb to know it subjectively. What we have to do is educate them. We call it positive criticism. What's your stand on reparations for Black people? We say the movement has a focus. We don't ask you your position on housing. We don't ask you your position on busing. Frankly, we don't give a damn. What's your position on reparations? What's your position on the $4.1 trillion? That's just in wages. We'll get to the damages later. What's your position, senora, compañero, however you say it? That's the question that has to be raised. And by the way, that $4.1 trillion is not even a drop in the bucket. I mean, the significance of that for this tribunal was, for the first time in history, the actual resources stolen from African people was quantified. And that's just in the United States alone. And it's a terrible understatement of the amount of value. Well, because ultimately the reality is that the whole social system and all the wealth and all the resources come from the stolen land of the indigenous peoples and the labor of African people. There's nothing that you can find in this country that you cannot say is part of quantifiable theft of resources. On tomorrow, the 15th and 16th, we'll be pulling together the beginning of the African National Reparations Organization. That's going to be a part of taking this demand out into the world. We have a long process to be involved in terms of bringing all this testimony and organization and organizing it and putting it out in the world. I'm not exactly sure what methods are going to be used yet. Our party has a minor capacity at publishing. I'm not quite sure what that means in terms of how we do it. I am hoping that this reparations organization that we create will have the ability to take on that task. There's a publishing company in England which had written when they knew that this tribunal was going to happen, suggesting that it would be willing to publish these proceedings. Then the reparations organization must be created to take it out in the world. Then these international sisters and brothers from various places where African people have been dispersed have to take it back and unite our brothers and sisters around the world with this demand, because as quietly as it's kept, for legal purposes, we are targeting the USA right now. But the US government and all of Europe understand the implications of a single nigger anywhere on the face of the earth demanding reparations. James Brown made a song about it called the Big Payback. United Nations. The brother said a little about his struggle, his structure, and its inherent injustice. It is an unjust, undemocratic organization, and the US has proved itself to be most undemocratic of them all. Here's a country preaching democracy all over the world, and you hear this ugly human being, Kirkpatrick is her name. You see this nauseating criminal, false species of a human being acting like a fool, talking about because people voted against the United States, voted against Israel. They're talking about the United Nations now. If you don't, if you quote, if you don't do what we say, we're going to take all the cash from the important programs that take medical aid to peoples around the world. That takes, in theory, food growing techniques to people around the world. If you vote against us, this bastion of democracy says we'll take the money away. We'll starve you to death. We'll make this organization collapse. This is what the United States is saying about the United Nations. That's supposed to be all of these things. So we'll start a rear guard action with all of the oppressed peoples around this world who don't have possession of state power. If you are as eager to leave as you say you are, then we'll demand that you go because of the treatment of Black people in the United States. And we'll demand of our allies and Black people who say they support our struggle that they demand the U.S. go. And this is a part of a ruling by the tribunal, by the way, that we said that the treatment of African people in the United States, based on the United Nations Charter itself, should require the expulsion of the United States from that body. So this is referencing that. There was a great man once whose name was Chairman Mao. He said, U.S. imperialism ain't nothing but a paper tiger. And here we have the peoples of the world quivering because of a punk organization like the U.S. saying we'll pull out. And you know it's a punk organization because every time we fought back against it, we won. Only time we lose is when we don't fight. The questions, every question that's around Black political prisoners and prisoners of war would be recognized as a just and righteous demand in the United Nations. The World Court, any court, depending on what we do. Assata Shakur is welcome here depending on what we do. This is 1982. We're saying political prisoners, all of them can be free depending on what we do, leaving this tribunal. There should be no place and no Black community anywhere in this country that a Sundiata Acoli can't come. And there should be no one that is not willing to do the kind of work that makes it possible for Sundiata Acoli to come there. What we do, we should never allow anybody else to take from us those revolutionary men and women whose difference from us is that they dared at the critical juncture in history to put their bodies on the line in the struggle for freedom and justice for Black people. If we, those of us in this room, take this stand outside this room, we legalize it ourselves. We are a self-legalizing body. We don't need the oppressor to legalize our struggle against it. We legalize ourselves in the struggle against our oppressor. States give themselves legality. What do you think imposed legality on the US government? Do you believe that garbage about that the Israelis talk about, that they went out on top of the mountain and the great hand wrote something on a piece of stone and sent it down by Moses? No. States give themselves power. So the people must have power, and the people must indicate that we confer upon the people ourselves the revolutionary power to carry out the will of this world tribunal. If you don't do it, there won't be no freedom and this tribunal will be meaningless. I'm hoping that one of the things that can come out of the African National Reparations Organization, ANRO, is the creation of a permanent tribunal. Some people may have the most mercenary interest in reparations. Whatever the interest, if you intend to collect, you're going to have to keep tabs on the damage done. So we need a permanent tribunal established, and we need to confer, African people need to confer on the African National Reparations Organization that is to be built, the right, the duty, the obligation to establish a permanent international tribunal to monitor the treatment of African people in this country. We have to do that, in my opinion. That is not to liquidate a lot of the other things which are going to happen. I'm sure the example there is going to be something shortly. I'm sure, for example, there's going to be something shortly after this tribunal, a convening of some international jurors of some repute who will take the documentation, the testimony, the indictment that we have made, who will review it, who will initiate legal opinions, legal writings, which is part of a legal effort to introduce the outcome here to the body of international jurisprudence, which is very important. On the legal front, we will do that. We will hopefully initiate some movement through the Black American Law Students Association, understanding the protracted nature of our struggle, catching them there, tying them up with the implications of the World Tribunal and the demand for reparations, and hopefully building something among the Black law students in this country so that they can have an opportunity to use law, which comes from the state, in the interest of the aspirations of Black people in this country, by contributing to this precedent in international law that we are talking about. There are other things that I'm sure will come out of this African National Reparations Organization, but in the last analysis, it will be we who will free us. It will be Black people willing to take on the task at hand, which will be responsible for our liberation. For most of us, I'm sure that's not shocking at all. Most of us understand exactly what our struggle is about. We have had 2 days of testimony, which I suspect has probably resulted in the most concentrated amount of documentation and information of this struggle and history of Black people in this country that has ever been amassed in a very long time, if ever before. And I'm saying this is important too, because people talk about HR 40, where the Congress will initiate a study to see if reparations, we did the study. That testimony came to that tribunal. That was legitimate testimony from historians, from social workers, from scientists, from political organizers, from actual people who live in communities where our oppression is occurring. Reparations are due to us. So we say, if nothing else, it seems to this people's advocate that one thing that we should have perceived from all of the testimony that's been presented is the absolute necessity for Black people to make our struggle on our own terms. When I say make our struggle on our own terms, I mean in the most important way. That part of those terms must be ideological. That is, we must control the ideas that motivate those who would make revolutionary struggle in the interest of Black people. Those who define rule, those who define rule, those who define rule. You may call them what you will. Anybody who's defining for Black people in this country in the last analysis are those who are making the determination for Black people in this country. Anybody, any place on the face of the earth who has someone else making determinations for them are a people who are living in bondage. We must make that determination. We had that determination in our hands up until the late 1960s and early 1970s. Our movement was attacked viciously, and we heard some of the testimony about that. It was attacked viciously. It was a method that the CIA had attempted in Vietnam, but failed. It was a method which in South Vietnam, they called the Phoenix Program. The idea of the Phoenix Program was to decapitate the leadership of the revolutionary movement in South Vietnam. The CIA murdered, assassinated, and this is documented, 39,000 cadre of the National Liberation Front in South Vietnam in an attempt to decapitate that movement, to crush the people's struggle to be free. In the United States of America, the United States government used that same Phoenix Program. It decapitated the Black liberation movement. Everywhere you looked up, Black people who stood on the side of freedom and justice and socialist democracy for Black people found themselves either in prison all over this country, dead or underground. But the US government had learned something from Vietnam, that it is not enough merely to decapitate a movement by killing its leaders. Fred Hampton said it very well. You can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. And so what happened to our community in the late 60s and early 70s is that someone else began to define for us ideologically other than ourselves. The last most important part of this movement we've been involved in for the last 10 years has been a fight to take control of our own movement. Once again, from those who call themselves our allies. Now, if nothing else, I think this tribunal shows us the very need the absolute need to control our own movement. Final remarks. There are North Americans in this country who say they are friends of the struggle of Black people. There's a representative, one of the best of the North American working class here, who has put forth his understanding of the tremendous task that's ahead in order to win the North American working class. It must not accept the Black liberation movement. It too must accept the Black liberation movement on our own terms. This was a representative from the African People's Solidarity Committee who that also spoke, gave testimony to the tribunal. This left, and listen to me, brothers and sisters, because this is very important. We've got to walk out of here with this. This left says it's for redistribution of the wealth. Don't you hear it said all the time? We're for redistribution of the wealth. We must say this to the left. So are we. We want our $4.1 trillion and all the struggles that you're involved in, where you say you're talking about Black folks. You've got to raise the demand for reparations. If you don't raise the demands for reparations, we are supposed to call them funny names. This left that saw 1 million people spend $1 million on a march, a picnic against the so-called nuclear war, when Black people in this country have a lifespan which is on the average 7 years shorter than white people in this country. And they're worried about a nuclear war. When the people in El Salvador are dying like flies from the imperialist power of this country, they're talking about a nuclear war. When folks who are interested in that campaign, they tell us this thing. They put forth slogans like money for social programs, not for bombs. They say that the money going to nuclear armaments and armaments generally is money that should be going into the programs for the people. We say we agree. We want $4.1 trillion reparations. And the next time a million of you walk down the streets in New York, raise the demand for reparations for Black people, not a single dollar for a single bullet. $4.1 trillion to the Black people, for Black people in the United States for 400 years of oppression. Black folks don't like to deal with white folks and the white left. Ain't nothing wrong with dealing with nobody if you do it on your own terms. Establish your terms. This World Tribunal has established the terms. The African National Reparations Organization will establish the terms. And yes, we'll talk to the anti-nuke movement about $4.1 trillion. The next time there's a march down the streets of New York, if they don't have no banners calling for reparations to Black people, they might have to fight us to get to where they're going. I say this in all honesty and all seriousness, sisters and brothers. They are talking about the possibility of nuclear accidents, nuclear war. Do you know that there are people around the world who would dance in the streets if a nuclear accident took this monster off the map? Do you know there are people around the world who would shout to the heavens if a nuclear accident took this monster off the map? The North American population, the working class included, must be able to recognize that it's going to have to unite with the masses of the peoples of the world, but it has to be consciously or otherwise united. The North American population, as white people, the working class included, must be able to recognize that it's going to have to unite with the masses of the people of the world. But it has consciously or otherwise united with its own ruling class. And every victory around the world against U.S. imperialism, because it's their false unity and false identification, because of their false unity and false identification, puts their back up against the wall. And if the North American working class or white people keep its back up against the wall in the face of the struggles of the peoples of the world, if it keeps its back up against the wall, how in the hell is it going to be able to read the writing that's on the wall? It won't be able to read the writing that's on the wall. So what has to happen is we have to make struggles on every level. If there's a Negro politician running for office anywhere, ask him about the decision of this World Tribunal. Make him say, yeah, I think it's legal, it's right. You've got to do it, but do it in public. Don't whisper it with your little letters to him. Ask him in the next meeting where he's having questions. Congressman, what's your position on the World Tribunal? Make these Negroes people who live off the blood of Black people, who struggles the masses, made it possible for them to be doctors so-and-so. These parasites who don't work for a living, but make their living of teaching us how to pray. Make them say that they unite with the outcome of this tribunal and with the demands of reparations. when your liberal politicians come through your community, you got to put it to the sucker. Well, what is your position on the World Tribunal on reparations for Black people? It came to certain particular conclusions about the United States and the oppression of Black people. Do you agree with them? What is your position on the demands for reparations for Black people in this country? And then there are other things that will happen too. But most importantly, this thing about this World Tribunal must be taken out into the world. It must be made legal in the sense that the masses of Black people and other people in the world understand it. If you do that, sisters and brothers, there ain't nothing that we can do wrong making this revolution. I'm going to just clarify that and end. There are some Black people who are being chased. Some are dead. Some are underground, ostensibly because they were involved in a robbery of a Brinks truck. This government has been able to paint those men and women as criminals. They call them robbers. There are people on the west coast of California who've been organizing in the prisons and in the Black community. This government is able to paint them as criminals. If we take this out into the world, if we take this World Tribunal and its conclusions out into the world, we clarify who the criminals are. And in addition to clarifying who the criminals are, if a Brinks trucks should be expropriated, everybody understands that a revolution needs funds. Nobody's going to have no problem with that. What's $1.6 million compared to 4.1 trillion? If we take this out into the world, they can't take a person like they did in the 60s and bring them before the courts and say, well, these people killed policemen in their communities while they were talking about freedom, and get away with it. Because if you take this out and make it legal in the eyes of the peoples of the world, and you understand that it's our struggle, then everybody else will understand that the oppressor sometimes and as often as possible will have to die for the oppressed to be free. Nobody holds it against the Vietnamese people for having killed Americans when they came there raiding their country. No rational person on the face of the earth, because the peoples of the world recognize the Vietnamese struggle as a just struggle. I shall tell you this, that it is the oppression of enslavement and enslavement of African people in this world that gave birth to U.S. capitalism and world imperialism. That the first crime that was committed by imperialism was committed against Black people. That we are the oldest victims of imperialism in the world, and that there cannot possibly be any struggle more just than the revolutionary struggle of African people here or anywhere on the face of the earth. I would like to thank this great, great, great African people for coming out, for making this possible. I would like to thank Sister Queen Mother Moore for being a living example in 1982 that we will fight from generation to generation. I would like to give a special appreciation to our panel of international jurors and ask Black people again to remember what came out of this testimony, out of this World Tribunal today, because there was one other thing that came out of it. That we got the same problems, same problems, same struggles everywhere Black people are located, and that being the case, sisters and brothers. You and African people throughout the world must demand that we unite this struggle around the world. You must demand it. You must not allow any nigga anywhere on the face of the earth to stand up and say they stand for Black people and they ain't united in some practical organizational way. You must demand it. We don't want any more discussion about Pan-Africanism. We want a demonstration of practical organizational unity that's coordinating the revolutionary struggle of Black people around this world. If we ain't willing to do that, then we shouldn't be standing up talking about no unity among Black people. That's what Marcus Garvey said. Does anybody call him a liar? He said, Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad. That was the only internationalism in that period of 1917, when the European Communist International collapsed in the face of their national chauvinism. It was Garvey and the Black movement around the world that held up the internationalism for the world to see. And it was that movement that was moved on by imperialism all around the world. I would like to thank our official observers for coming here and being with us. And with that, sisters and brothers, Africans and peoples of the world, this World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States is officially adjourned. Thank you. They say cut back. We say payback. Reparations now. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, I just really want to appreciate this incredible study so far. And I just really also want to appreciate you, your leadership over this whole process, and also to our online viewers who are tuned into this study with us on Facebook and on YouTube. And we are going to go ahead and jump into the question and answer portion of our program. But before we do that, I want to recognize where people are viewing from. So we have San Diego, California, St. Petersburg, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Somerville, Massachusetts, Louisville, Kentucky, Orlando, Florida, Seattle, Washington, Occupy Tanzania, South Africa, Lakeland, Florida, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, Brooklyn, New York, Richmond, Virginia, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Jacksonville, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Spokane, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, Augusta, Georgia, Rockford, Illinois, Washington, D.C., Oakland, California, Dearborn, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, Norway, Newark, New Jersey, Columbia, Missouri, Hempstead, New York, and Huntsville, Alabama. So Uhuru, comrades from where you're viewing from. So actually, Chairman, we had a question. They had 3 questions that were made last week. And so we're going to take those first, and then we're going to jump into questions that came in from this week. So to those remaining questions, it came from Priscilla Amado, and I believe they were in Cape Verde. And they asked it's 2 questions. So the first question was, may you please describe the socialist position of the African People's Socialist Party in its context rooted in African culture, economics, and politics to distinguish from the European notion?
Uhuru, African internationalism does that automatically. African internationalism is a worldview that is informed by the history of African people and our place and destiny in the world, a history that is immediately derived, of course, from the theft of our land, resources, culture, what have you, for the creation of what is now known as capitalism, is the colonial domination of African peoples around the world. So recapturing I think it was Cabral who once talked about the revolution of African people is a part of the process of putting ourselves back into history. So everything revolves around the African struggle, African dispossession, even of our culture, identity, and things like that, and is built into the process, recognizing, of course, that power is real. It is practical, that we have to assume power, take power ourselves in order for that to make itself manifest. So that's how I would respond to that. I want to say that I'm clear on that. There are some forces who say that the cultural question is somehow, the most profound thing, that if you struggle for a culture, somehow that automatically translates into liberation for African people. That's not the case. We had the culture before white man attacked us. So therefore, if that should have been the vaccination that would have prevented them from being successful. There has to be a revolutionary culture. It has to be a culture that arises, of course, with its foundation in Africa and our experience as African, but that has been developed based on the conditions that imposed on us and that exist up to this day. I hope that was helpful, Comrade Priscilla.
Uhuru. And then the next question was, may you please share?
We're in the process of even developing a culture. The revolution does that. And culture is not something that is static. I visited some years ago some Africans who were living in huts in one of the Carolinas in the United States. They call it an African village. And they were living in some kind of huts and stuff, and they would take money when you enter their village, and they would give you cowrie shells instead in order for you to purchase their stuff in the village and what have you. And so, but there were several problems with that, not the least of which presupposes that without the intervention of imperialism, without capitalism, colonialism taking all of our resources, that we still be living in huts. when the reality is all the resources and genius in Africa means that we would have had the most extraordinary kind of civilization continue. So that's what I mean. Culture is extremely important, but it's not static. It's, you don't just have culture and then, just because we used to go up to the mountaintop and do male circumcision, that somehow, if you don't do that, you are no longer a part of the culture of African people. And even that ceremony, by the way, had serious kind of medical and other implications about why it was important and how that came to be a part of the cultural expressions. So I just wanted to say that, Comrade Priscilla. Uhuru.
Uhuru. And their second question from last week was, may you please share the role that the elders of December 12th movement in Brooklyn played in this tribunal? My work and intro to the reparation struggle came when actively organizing with D12 in New York.
That's an important question, and I'm glad it was raised. In fact, when we began organizing for the tribunal in New York, there are people who are probably a part of this study on today who we put together various kinds of conferences, hearings, forums around the reparations question, dynamic forums. And it was that process that brought D12 through, I think it was Roger Wareham, to one of the events that we were doing building for the tribunal. So D12 has been involved in the reparations question issue for a very long time. And to say that about D12, I have to make a distinction about its willingness, at least to do what I've just mentioned in terms of participating in some of the forums in New York that we established all over in virtually every borough there, to bring African people participation into the tribunal. I distinguish it from, there were forces in New York, African forces, who are class enemies, who so much hate the leadership of the African working class that they did everything they could. And they boycotted it, they organized boycotts of the tribunal so that to keep the masses away from it. D12, did what I just mentioned. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Priscilla, for that question. So that concludes the questions from last week. And I just wanted to also acknowledge people are, they drop in their locations as we mention other locations. So we have viewers in Japan, Peekskill, New York, Detroit, Michigan, and Tanzania as well. So Uhuru. All right, so for questions from this week, let's see. Okay, so we'll start with, let's see what's in order. Okay, we have a question from the last African. How should we view the diversity of this U.S. administration to affect Black people? And I guess the current Biden.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting and important kind of question. And I think too that it really speaks to the growing desperation and crisis of imperialism, because they want to show us that as some kind of example of as it was just mentioned, of some diversity, and Biden is going to make his administration looks like America looks. And part of what they've had to do, the crisis is so deep, and what we've seen is the majority of white people organized around Donald Trump. That is to say, more than almost 2/3 of the white people who participated in the last election for president voted for Trump. And so that means that a lot of the oppressed and colonized people inside this country voted for Biden. That means that a sector of the ruling class depends on participation support from the colonized people for its success in carrying out its colonial and imperialist objectives. And that's called neo-colonialism most of the time. So when you look up and you see the head of what they call the Department of Defense, but more accurately, it used to be known as Department of War, being an African man. When you see the one who is responsible for, as custodian over the indigenous peoples in this country in the Department of Interior, as it's called, and this comes back from the very early stages in the development of the U.S. government and state power. This department has presided over the domination of the indigenous peoples here. I mean, you're seeing the need for this government to put directly in places of significance sectors from the oppressed people to disguise and obscure the fact that it is white power operating in blackface and red face or whatever the hell you want, because they are not fighting against the power. They have become an instrument of the power. And that's what we see with the Biden administration. And I think it's important when you look at the fact that they would make this African over what they call the Department of Defense, then you know something about U.S. foreign policy and what it's going to be directed at. And that's black people, that's colonized people around the world. That's the critical issue. And as much as they talk about China and Russia being problems, the fact is the United States government never fought Russia, never fought China directly, fought China through Korea. But the fact is that they've always fought the colonized peoples. And this is what this government is about. And this is why you have a Department of War now, where the official force is concentrated in the leadership of some African man who becomes the cover for the aggression of U.S. imperialism globally, from Afghanistan to northern parts of Africa. And of course, there are extensions, military extensions existing inside the United States and other places in the form of the army and military. And I want to say, you know, you heard about things like AFRICOM. And we were talking about this earlier this morning in the discussion in the African Summit that we just had. The reality is that that all of the governments in Africa are extensions of the U.S. state power. So if you got a military in Nigeria, it is a part of the U.S. military instrument. It is the state power of the United States that is extended to Nigeria, extended to Somalia, extended to Ghana, South Africa, and all these other places. So you hear about AFRICOM, but the AFRICOM becomes necessary only because of the crisis of imperialism, and those puppet regimes are not capable of maintaining the status quo, keeping African people held down by themselves anymore. And much of what you hear in terms of terrorism, they're fighting against terrorism, these are people who are fighting against those local puppet governments. And yes, many of them are on the wrong side of the question in terms of what it takes to make revolution, because they haven't had access to African internationalism like you. If they did, then they would understand they cannot reproduce the actions in themselves that the colonizer imposes on the rest of us. Uhuru. Who was that? Comrade, last man standing?
That was the last African, so close. Yes. Girl, last African on YouTube. Thank you. And he did ask another question, but I'll get to it after we answer some more. So we had Comrade Mwambi in San Diego ask, Chairman, in the document, the masses were charged to ask their local politicians about their position on the Reparations Tribunal in 1982. How did it impact those politicians' cities? And what would be an equivalent question in current times to ask politicians what their position is on reparations?
I think during these times, a question to raise is, what's your position on the outcome of the World Tribunal on Reparations that was held in New York in 1982? And if you don't know, you better look it up. And you should be familiar yourself with we use, like I said, international law as the basis for this. And so you should know that. You should be able to understand that. And so this takes us away and above this whole issue of waiting for the Congress and waiting for the implementation of HR 40 or HR whatever the hell it is. We've already made a decision. What's your position? Black people made this decision. So I think that's what we should do. And in terms of how the politician responded at that time, I think what we've seen is that throughout the United States, we went through something like 11 consecutive years of holding the Reparations Tribunal. And the thing at the juncture was to build a movement that would begin demanding this and imposing this on politicians. So the majority of the work that we did around that question was to win it ideologically among African people, and then to build the organizational structures that can carry this demand out into masses of our people. So I think we've seen the reparations demand now taking shape, taking form, and we hear, you know, people who the white ruling class has discovered to be experts on the reparations question. And I think all of that stems from the work that we've done up to now. So, and there were other examples on the continent of Africa. I mean, you know, we saw Nigeria want to jump on the reparations question, but for that head of state, and I've forgotten which one it was at the time, he was talking about reparations should be the forgiveness of debt. And what we're saying is the debt is part of the basis for calling reparations, because we don't owe them nothing, never have owed them understand. So they take anything, so they take the resources and blood from the people and they charge you for having taken it. That's what the French have done with in more than 14 different so-called free states, independent states in Africa. They rob and looting Africa. They take something like 65% of the foreign reserves from Africa, and then charge the Africans, these micro phony states, 20% handling charges for that, so that 85% of our resources go to them, to these colonial powers and what have you. So the fact is that we don't owe them anything. They owe us everything, the clothing on their backs. When they walk down the streets in San Diego, if they got clothes on, they got it from us. And they got it from the indigenous people called Mexicans and other things in that area. That's ours. We don't owe them anything. So that there was a shield. This guy from Nigeria, the head of state there, who was talking about that, was acting as a cover for imperialist white power to make sure that we don't recover anything and we stay in this hole of debt forever, owing them for enslaving us. Uhuru. So, Comrade Mwambi, you got to do that. You got to make the politicians respond appropriately. And that's one of the reasons it's so important to have the African Socialist International existing all over the world. Uhuru. Make them respond to the legitimacy of our institution. We don't have to be slaves or running around asking them to legitimize us.
Right. Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman, for that answer. And thank you, Comrade Mwambi, for the question. We're going to move now to a question from Comrade Robin in Orlando, Florida. And Robin asks, is it accurate to give an individual dollar amount for reparations to be given to, for African people?
I mean, you know, the thing that made it important for us to quantify that in the 1982 tribunal that we had is because it was just an abstract concept before. I mean, you know, but to actually put a dollar number to it made it concrete in so many ways in the brains of people. So it's not just an idea. It can be represented concretely in the real world. The fact of the matter is, of course, that the imperialist system will not be able to survive a revolutionary demand for reparations. And we distinguish what we are doing around the reparations question as from those who would simply be involved in making rich slaves, living in a gilded cage. The objective from our perspective is to destroy this relationship we have. And in the process of doing that, we would take whatever resources that are available to us to begin to negate the presence, significance, and power of colonialism in our lives. And Black Power 96 is an extraordinary example of that, where we are taking reparation resources, et cetera, that we are using to be constructing our own economic capacity. And we do that everywhere we're located in the world. So Comrade Robin, I think that's the appropriate way to really understand the reparations. So we demand and unite with the demand for reparations. However, it's being pursued. If it doesn't say it's a reparation at the expense of the unity of African people, like that police organization that's called ADOS. And I'm not speaking to all you nice people who are members of ADOS. I know that you really believe in it, but the fallacy of that question can be seen in the fact that in 1982, you know, we were pushing the reparations question. So it was not something that was just created yesterday. And you will see that Africans from various places around the world participated in that as judges. And you should know also that the day after the founding of ANWO, ANRO, the African National Reparations Organization, we pulled together from that same body of people, the African Socialist International of African people organizing throughout the world with the mission, the liberating African people and raising the demand for reparations. So I know that was a long-winded kind of response, Comrade Robin, and I know that it's not, and so fight for reparations, but you have to recognize that the objective is not, again, to make some fat slaves or some happy slaves, but to take our freedom, to take our complete, total freedom, and the reparations demand is a function of the revolution. And for it to be significant, it's not going to be based on what a representative U.S. government does, but based on the organization of our people, and especially from among the African working class. Uhuru. Thank you, Robin.
Uhuru, yes, thank you, Robin, and thank you, Chairman, for that answer. Also want to shout out these locations: Denver, Colorado, Toronto, Canada, Bermuda, Walkerville, Maryland, Kuwait, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Uhuru, comrades. Our next question, and I think you kind of touched on it with Mwambi's question, but LaShawn on Facebook asks, what can we do to demand the Democratic Party give us reparations now? Is the question.
Well, Comrade LaShawn, this demand is something that's being pushed. I know early on, the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparation had brought to us the idea of mobilizing as many people as possible to demand what they call a down payment on reparations from the Biden administration, that make that be part of what he has to do within the first 100 days of that. We have not heard more from them. We've heard of the intents of other groups to be making a demand on the Biden administration for reparations. But so I don't know. The thing is that I'm sure that before it's over, we're going to see many forces who will come out and say they are for reparations. The Democratic Party and even the Republican Party has that ability, believe it or not, because we've seen things like Forbes magazine and other actual journals of the ruling class put forth arguments for the validity of reparations, and they will do this as the crisis deepens, as the struggle of our people grows stronger, more significant, and more threatening to the stability of the U.S. government and to the system itself. So you're going to see reparations being offered. You're going to see the Democratic Party and others, I believe, say that you can have a glorified, modified, modernized form of welfare that they want to call reparations. But reparations, in order to really repair the damage, is what reparations actually stands for. What was the fundamental damage that was done to African people? And the fundamental, most significant damage that was done to us was the expropriation of our right to be a self-governing and self-determining and liberating people, to have our own power, to be self-reliant. That's the thing that was taken. So to be self-reliant means that not that you just create some kind of welfare program, but that those resources that we take negates your power, your influence, and contributes to the ability of African people to feed, clothe, and house ourselves. That's part of the project that we recognize in the African People's Socialist Party as an ongoing strategic struggle for dual power and dual and contending power. For power, we get the power over our lives, not just as something to sit side by side with white power, but to contend with white power for control of African resources globally, etc. So that's the long-winded response that I have to you, Comrade LaShawn.
Uhuru. Thank you, LaShawn, and thank you, Chairman. Our next question came from Tony in Japan, and asked they're watching on YouTube, and they ask, is it true that the U.S. has concluded that they cannot pay reparations to a color?
I don't think there's any position about not being able to pay reparations to a color from the United States. I mean, you know, even in this last presidential election, in the primaries, you saw these representatives of white power who, some of them who actually stood up and say they believe in reparations, reparations should be happening. I think that the struggle of people, of African people all around the world, including those like you, Brother Tony, in Japan, the raising this question creates quite a quandary for U.S. imperialism. I think they pull out the stops and trying to offer up all kinds of arguments why it's not viable. If you remember when Barack Hussein Obama first ran for U.S. president, and at the first so-called debate they had in Harlem, New York, in fact, the question was raised. I think there were 12 or 13 of them on the platform. The question was raised for all of the contenders for the Democratic Party primary victory, the question was raised, their position on reparations. And Barack Hussein Obama was first out of the block, first out saying that he was opposed to reparations because he didn't believe that we should be doing things that just dealt with historical wrongs because somehow that contributed to the disunity of the one America that he was looking at. But the reality is that as soon as he got off that platform, he ran straight to Miami, where he fell on his belly at the feet of a Zionist of Jews in Miami, promising to give make the capital of Israel Jerusalem, the whole capital, which had not been done. I mean, Trump formalized it when he got there, but Obama is the one who initiated that as a suggestion. Never had been done before. So the fact is that the Democrats, Republicans, the U.S. government will protect its own interests, and at some juncture, it will say, depending on how well organized, how significant your demand for reparations become, they'll say, we'll hold off on the reparations by giving the Negroes something. They'll resurrect Obama and put him in the chief Negro in charge of reparations with his Jive Time program. He came out with some kind of program that's supposed to be helping, young African boys who are in trouble. You help African boys who are in trouble by destroying imperialism that put us all in trouble. But he won't do that. And so, you have these efforts that will be made, Kermit, Tony in Japan, to put forth what they call reparations, but they won't say, they increasingly, it's hard for them to say that they won't give reparations to African people. The ones who are saying it mostly are these Black leftists in our own communities who are afraid to demand reparations because they claim that doing so would alienate or offend what they call our allies. And you ain't got an ally. It's not a real ally if that person or that group or that entity is opposed to African people getting paid for 400 or 500 years of forced labor and brutality that has been imposed on us. Good, Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much for that answer. And thank you, Tony, for the question. Moving now to questions from Kwame Madden. Kwame asks, some people are making, I don't know if you had a chance to watch this, Chairman, also. This 22-year-old woman, African woman, who presented a poem at the inauguration. He asked, some people are making a big deal of this young 22-year-old poet, but spitting out great poetry doesn't change the material conditions of Black people or the war on them. What is your take on this?
Well, the fact is that we always provide the entertainment for the white ruling class. We were doing that even during slavery. Get the nigga out and dance or sing or throw a ball or dribble or jump high, anything like that. We have been sort of the entertainment for imperialist white power. And there's a lovely child who stood up and did her poem, and her consciousness has been informed so much like the consciousness of most African people that the way you make it, the way you do it is you perform in a fashion that pleases the ruling class. By the way, even the worst kind of foul hip hop that you see does the same thing. It plays the same role. I mean, the system says that if you want to have a successful record, they've created a model for what would take. You want to have a big hit, you want to get signed on to a big label, you got to say, horrible things about African women. You got to talk about shooting and killing and robbing ourselves and taking drugs, etc. So that youngster was no different. She was just a more polished, as far as the bourgeoisie is concerned, respectable statement of the same thing. So as long as they control us, as long as they control our brains, as long as our movement is not strong enough to challenge the consciousness of that young African woman who actually appears to want to say something right about our condition, then we'll have these representatives of white power in blackface, and we do clever things. I mean, even Ray Charles can sing America in a way that would make the most brutal, brutally critical critic of white power America groove with it. I mean, we do that quite well. We celebrate with great skill and fervor our own oppression, and that child was doing that. Our responsibility is to build a movement that will that she will be unable to escape. That there is no value, there is no privilege. I remember in the 1960s, one concern that we had was that the ruling class really promoted this idea of through movies and other things like that, pimps gangsters. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what we were up against even at that time. And so we knew we had to build a movement that gained the same kind of stature among young people who, those who really push cultural, contemporary culture forward. We had to build a movement that would attract their consciousness, attract their attention, so that this cultural battering ram of African internationalism could prevail, or the revolution could prevail. We got to do that now. Uhuru. That's part of what we're doing now, by the way. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And that was Brother Kwame, currently watching on Facebook. So thank you for that answer, Chairman. Our next question comes from Abraham Funk on YouTube. And he asks, and I don't know if you know about the situation, but perhaps you do. He asks, what do you think of bee wine in Uganda? Is the situation there an indicator that Africans, especially the youth, have had enough of the status quo?
Yeah, it's a statement that the youth have had enough of the status quo. But Billy Wine is not necessarily representative of the interests. I mean, in white power in this country, Wall Street Journal and everything celebrates Billy Wine. The fact is that the rulers, imperialist rulers, do get tired of these ancient forces who dominate Africa. Even if you look at Uganda, the role that Uganda is playing in Africa and has played for a while, in Uganda under Museveni, who was celebrated by so-called Black Pan-Africanists as this great Pan-Africanist leader and what have you. The fact is that Uganda is playing a central role for U.S. imperialism, and when they wear it out, when the people hate it so much that they become opposed to it and start moving and building movements, and you see in Uganda, there's been this long existing movement, the Lord's Army of, I've forgotten exactly the name of it, but, and this is happening not just in Uganda, but you have similar manifestation in Nigeria and other places where these forces are at play because the contradictions are so deep by Museveni and all these other puppet Negroes who are standing on top of our Africa, that masses of people want to deal with them. So the imperialists who put them there, who kept them there, will begin to move against them. You go to England now, you go to London, you will find all kinds of so-called movements for Black people there, and they have a direct contact with the British government, even though they are opponents of puppets of England or France or someplace else, because they're in waiting. They're on the bench, so to speak. And so when the thing comes down, these are forces that they can throw into the game to relieve the existing forces, and that's what's happened. Museveni has clearly nearly outlived any usefulness that he has for imperialism. His presence there does more now to sharpen contradictions and build the crisis than it does to prevent the masses from rising up. And so now many of the masses are trying to rise up, and imperialism give them a Bobby Wine. And Bobby Wine, I haven't heard a single thing coming out of his mouth that suggests that anything other than he's opposed to corruption and Museveni is a bad guy. I haven't heard anything out of his mouth that presupposes the liberation of Africa, the destruction of those borders, the need for the working class to ascend to power, or anything that even challenges the role that Museveni played in Uganda, in Africa. He hasn't criticized that. So that's what we have to do. So we are building in Africa, building in Uganda to build the African Socialist International there, so that the African people really will have an opportunity to change our circumstances. And that's a protracted struggle we're involved in. And so we say free Bobby Wine, but Bobby Wine ain't the solution to the problems that we've got. Uhuru.
Uhuru, and that was from Abraham on YouTube.
Funk, correct?
Abraham Funk, yeah. Uhuru. All right. Our next question came from the username King on Facebook. I mean, not Facebook, YouTube. Asks, Uhuru, much thanks for this analysis. What does the chairman think in regards to quote unquote Black History Month and whether I should demand its observance in my child's school? And they mentioned that they live in a 94% white district.
Well, let me just say, I think it would be all right for you to make that demand in that 94% white district. But ultimately, and so that's a part of the whole struggle of ideologically challenging the perception of people in this country, and even our own perception. And I think that if you are going to make a struggle for Black history, it has to be for real Black history. We don't care that George Washington Carver, the lie that he created peanut butter. Peanut butter has been existing in Africa for ages. What George Washington Carver and his parents did was bring it to the United States. But to say that George Washington Carver created peanut butter and not say that Jiffy stole it from Black people and we're starving and these major corporations have the benefit, that's not good enough. You got to be able to tell a real history. And our history didn't start in a cotton plantation or in Mississippi, anything else. Now, the reason that's important is not because of some false kind of cultural nationalist aspirations, but because the people can't know what it is capable of doing if it doesn't know what it has done. And that our history is a glorious history that brought civilization to the planet Earth, et cetera. And I think it's all right to struggle for that. But beyond that, we have to recognize that there's a sister who we work with in the Black is Black Coalition. Her name is Betty Davis. She is an educator, and she makes the point all the time that cats do not educate mice, they eat them. And so that's what we need to understand about this relationship we have with colonialism. It is never going to serve us, that we have to create our own capacity. First, we got to get the cat out of our lives and existence and grow our own capacity to educate ourselves as a people toward our liberation. Uhuru. So King, this was King?
Yes,
right.
King. All right, thank you, King. And this is our last question. And if you're answering this, another question comes in, then I will let you know, obviously. But this is our last question so far. And it's going back to the last African. And he asks, how different were Black icons of the 60s versus the pawns inside the plot today?
They were different enough that the US government and other imperialist forces saw us as a threat that had to be eliminated. They killed us. And that's the thing that Malcolm died because that people are celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday. What you need to, in the process of doing that, is recognize that he's not alive or he was killed. He didn't die a natural death. He died because he represented a threat to the ongoing easy, happy functioning of this system at our expense. They killed Malcolm X. They murdered Malcolm. Malcolm was the ideological, in contemporary terms, he was the transmission belt from Marcus Garvey to the 1960s. And that was the one, Malcolm is what contaminated the political situation, terrain in the United States and much of the world to such an extent, and I say much of the world, to such an extent that Martin Luther King was dangerous. Because increasingly Africans were moving toward the philosophy and that Malcolm X was putting forth in contention with the philosophy of nonviolent acceptance, more or less, of the U.S. that people have come to associate with King. Of course, King every day, people like to recognize that King was a kind of radical force, and he was. To do what he did, he had to be a very radical force. He mobilized millions and millions of African people and actually brought the question of African struggle to Africans all around the world. King was in Ghana in 1958 when Nkrumah pulled together that first meeting to try to organize Africans throughout the African continent. So he was a really important and influential person in the 1960s. We had a movement that was being driven. And ideologically, that movement had been encapsulated by much of what Malcolm X was expressing and pushing forward at that time. So these were movements that actually threatened the social system, not simply trying to become a part of the social system. So even though the King movement was a part of the so-called desegregation integration process by the radical sector of the liberal African petty bourgeoisie on the one hand, but on the other hand, the influence of Malcolm and the experiences of Africans throughout this country was pushing even King to places that he might not have intended to go. I was in Los Angeles, California in 1965 when the Watts Rebellion happened. And the first thing they did was they brought out Dick Gregory and Watts, and he was supposed to calm the masses down and stuff, and Black people shot him. And then and they brought in King, the high priest, Will Rogers Park. He came and he spoke. And when he started talking this nonviolence, the masses booed him off the platform. The fact is that the people were pushing beyond what the nonviolent, we shall overcome, let's become a part of America politics was forwarding through the lips of Black people, radical Black people. And it was the philosophy of Malcolm that was capturing the consciousness and direction of what we should be doing. And that's the kind of thing that even pushed King beyond where he would have gone automatically by himself. But that's all right, because we should all be influenced by the masses. The masses should be the ones that say, no, I don't like this direction, let's go this direction. And that's what happened with King. And that's one of the reasons King had to die. So the difference is that these were Africans who were changing the relationship that we have with white power altogether, and not just trying to join white power like Jesse and Al and all these other charlatans who run around calling themselves our leaders. So I hope that was helpful at Last African.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the Last African on YouTube. And we did have some more questions come in. So this next question came from Masamba on YouTube, and they asked, Uhuru, Brother Chairman, regarding Nigeria, what is the plan of the movement?
Well, in Nigeria, it's a place that we really have to sit down in a good way. We've got a lot of followers in Nigeria, but we have to consolidate the actual organization in Nigeria. We have not done that effectively up to now. You in Nigeria, well, I don't know if you're there or not, but at different times we've had members of the ASI, the party in Nigeria. But we have to consolidate ourselves organization. It's not good enough. We're not lone wolves that we can't make the revolution by ourselves. We can't just be radical in this place and think that represents something extremely meaningful. We have to have organization on the ground. We are preparing to govern. If we plan to govern, then there needs to be bodies on the ground being organized to do that in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, in Ghana, in occupied Azania, in Houston, Texas, and various other places where we're located. We are building a revolutionary apparatus with the assumption that we're going to have power. The working class will have power through us. We will govern. And so Nigeria, we still have a lot of work to do. If you're there, if you know somebody who's genuinely interested in making the struggle in a protracted way, as opposed to simply trying to find another form of what do they call these, non-NGO? We're not an NGO. And that's something that sometimes forces get mistake us for when we make our presence in particular places in Africa. That's what people have been accustomed to, NGOism, as opposed to building revolutionary movements. Uhuru. So, Carmen Masamba, I hope that, and indicate where you're located. Uhuru.
Yes, Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, thank you, Masamba. And I just want to emphasize at anywhere you are located in the world, apspuhuru.org, go ahead and sign up, give us your, fill out the contact form and, get involved, because we have, and I believe Chairman Tafari is on as well, who's the National Director of Organization for Africa. So to be able to get in contact with this brother if he indicates his location. So the next
comment director.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for us to say that over the many years we've been working to build the African Socialist International. Right now, we're in better place and better shape than we've ever been with that. We have real organization and leaders for organizations throughout the world, in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Europe, in the United States, etc. And that there's a time, because Africa is in very desperate straits. It has been since the white man first put his filthy foot on the continent and forcing Africa to do something against their will. So Africa's in desperate straits. And because we're in desperate straits, African people, generally speaking, we always need an immediate solution, and there is no immediate solution. There's a protracted struggle that we're involved in. And you have to be there for the love of liberty for African people and the absolute need for Africans to unite and to get rid of our oppressors so that we can be free and build the kind of world that we want. If in fact, if otherwise, you are just somebody who's interested in seeing how you can get your hustle on and how that's going to be helped by becoming a part of this group, don't send any information at all. Because we can't even say with any kind of certainty that we're going to put an economic project down where you're located, your community, anything like that. It's not even about that. We want the whole economy. We want all the resources of Africa, and that requires having a protracted, long view. And that's what being a part of the African Socialist International is all about. So if you are interested, you should make that, you should indicate that. If you can unite with the objective of overturning all oppression, exploitation of Africa, and building a liberated and united Africa and African people globally, if you're ready to make that trek, then you should contact us. And you should, in whatever way you have connected to this study on today, if you're not a part of the party of the Uhuru movement, and you want to do something of the nature that we're talking about, then you should indicate that. And you should even give us, leave the information about how we can get in touch with you to pull through on that. Because we are organizing all over the world, and Africa is going to be free. And we just don't need anybody. We really, 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 really are not just hungry for somebody who just want to be in the crowd and not committed to the long-term interest of overturning our oppression. So if it's about doing something for you and your cousin and your family only or primarily, don't contact us, please. Contact the Red Cross or aid, whatever it's called that the American government is putting for people like that. Our objective is to get rid of our oppression and to become a self-governing people in Africa and every place else. Uhuru. So, Masamba, I know you're on top of it, though.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman. And so now we are nearing the end of the session. We do have one more question, and it is the last question. So we're going back to Comrade Robin, and they asked, I've recently joined the Reparations Working Group of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. What should we be moving toward? A tribunal, teaching international precedents? That's the questions.
I mean, I think those are all of the kinds of things that you could be doing. You got to remember, though, the coalition is an organization of organizations. So that different forces have come into the coalition, really with different, if related, worldviews. And our perspective of the African People's Socialist Party around the reparation questions will not coincide exactly with the perspective, perhaps even of the reparations group. Thing that makes it important for us for the Reparation Working Group is pushing the demand for reparations, is helping the people to understand that even in international legal circles, reparations is recognized as something that's significant. So, but I do believe that all the work that we're doing for reparations should be pushing forward the significance of that World Tribunal, because much of the reparations work that's happening in the world today is happening as reparations work. It's not happening as work to overturn our oppression. The reparation is the central question. For us, the central question is liberation and unification of African people, and reparations is one of an instrument for making that happen. So for us, the real way to achieve reparations is through the intervention of people. As you know, our party has been dealing with reparations for 40 years or so, and we get reparations into the masses of our people through these economic development projects that we are putting there in place. So that would be our approach. And we would say yes, and I'm calling on the party and all of our institutions, instruments to be taken out this World Tribunal, and saying to people, to everybody that they need to be uniting with the outcome of this World Tribunal. You can find that in this abbreviated report that's put in Reparations Now. You can get that, and that's what we should be taking out. So I believe that should happen, and I believe it's possible that could also be introduced to the Reparations Working Group that you participate with in the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And I know Sister Director is trying to end this process. So I hope that was helpful, Sister Robin. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Robin, and thank you to all of our viewers who asked your questions. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and move to conclude this study. Chairman, I want to go ahead and open it up to you if you have any closing remarks before we get into our announcements for today.
Well, the fundamental thing that I want to put forward is that next Sunday, we're going to start reading from the political report to the second plenary of the 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And I think it's going to be an extraordinary piece. We're doing this, as I mentioned earlier, because there's not going to be enough time in the plenary itself for me to read the entire document. So we'll start the reading next Sunday. And so hopefully by the time we get to the plenary, we can complete that process successfully. This is really important. So please be anticipating that, and anticipate that you will get information, the document from the upcoming plenary soon. And you should be prepared to participate in that plenary as well. If you see what's happening with our party and our movement globally now, you will see that Africa is being brought together again, because finally the African working class has its own revolutionary party in the form of the African People's Socialist Party, and that we are everywhere, and that we are growing and bringing more and more Africans from around the world into this process of actually having structures there with the intent of taking power and governing under the leadership of the African working class. So thank you so much, Comrade Director. And I know you only got a few minutes to get your what do you call it, announcements to Uhuru.
Yep, so let's get it. All right, this study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. And for revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via our app for Apple or Android, or you can go to our website, blackpower96.org. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All of the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is spent focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. You can also order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, as well as other texts written by the chairman at burningspearmarketplace.com. The Black Power Summits, today is the last day for these summits, and it's calling on all African people in North America, the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, and wherever African people are to join us today, January 24th, for the final summits happening in the Northern region and the Midwest region in the U.S. So the Northern region begins right after this, 10 a.m. Eastern, and the Midwest region at 1 p.m. Central Time. You can register still at Black Power Summit 2021.eventbrite.com, and that's also in the chat box for you, being dropped right now. So you guys can register for that to attend both summits. All right, so that's the Black Power Summit. The African People's Socialist Party is inviting you to our second 7th Congress plenary, February 6th through the 9th, 2021, themed African Workers of the World, Unite and Organize. The plenary will be virtual, so anywhere you are in the world, you can attend. And you can register today at apsplenary.org. And in case you missed it at the beginning of the study, we'll go ahead and play the plenary promo video for you right now.
Of people that's been dispersed against our will. We must be organized. There are material objectives that we have as a people.
We can't settle.
We demand reparations. We are one people. We are one Africa. We are Africans. We were Africans when we got on the ship. We are Africans when we got off the ship.
Black power matters.
We have to recognize that America is a settler colony. The police are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. All over the world, you see people rising up. The people must have power. Because we are Africans. Our power to the people. Black power to the African community. They thought they had destroyed the movement, but we are here to tell them that black is back. Black is back. Capitalism must be destroyed. Colonialism must be destroyed. The people must have power.
How can you not register for that? apsplenary.org. Go ahead and register, and that's again February 6th through the 9th, happening virtually. All right, so the Black Panther Commemoration Committee of New Jersey/New York is selling Black Panther, Malcolm X, Che Guevara pins, watches, and other Black Power memorabilia in support of political prisoners. So you can order your merchandise at www.naabpp.org, and half of these proceeds do go to political prisoners. Every Tuesday from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Ralph Pointer is a member of the Black is Back Coalition and chairs the Political Prisoner Working Group. He is a longtime freedom fighter and leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. To tune in via phone, call 347-857-3293, or you can listen on the computer at Blog Talk Radio. We are calling on people to follow the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus COVID-19. APDEP has recently launched an international telehealth program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. Looking for more opportunities of live political education from Chairman Omali Yeshitela? Tune in every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Chairman Omali Yeshitela Facebook like page and the Burning Spear TV YouTube page with Chairman's weekly address to the African nation, discussing important topical issues and providing us with an African internationalist analysis. And lastly, to keep up with our movement events, you can visit theburningspear.com's events page and also subscribe to our mailing list. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Uhuru.